It was one of those strangely quiet evenings that sneak up on you, the kind that feel like they're holding their breath. I'd left work early for once. A power outage at the office meant no emails, no meetings, no excuses. I should have felt relief, maybe even happiness. I was pulling into the driveway just past 5 p.m. Sun still up, birds chirping. Not a single thing on my mind except the chance to spend a normal, quiet night with my wife. We'd both been so busy lately. Maybe this would be a chance to reconnect. Finally have that wine night we kept putting off, or even just eat a real dinner together that didn't come out of a takeout box. But the moment I opened the front door, something felt wrong. It wasn't loud. Nothing obvious. No shouting or slamming or drama. Just this weird stillness, like the house itself had paused the moment it heard my key in the lock. And that's when I saw it, the hoodie. It hung neatly over the edge of the coat rack. Not thrown. Not draped. Hung. Like whoever owned it had taken the time to treat our entryway like their home. It wasn't mine. I'd never seen it before. It was dark green, heavy, a little worn on the sleeves like someone had been fidgeting with the cuffs out of habit. The logo was from an Oregon college football team. Not local, not Big Ten, and definitely not something you'd pick up unless you'd lived out there or rooted for them personally. Melanie and I were born and raised in Michigan. We didn't have any Oregon ties. Our friends didn't either. I stared at it longer than I should have. I don't even know why. It wasn't like I had some grand realization in that moment. It was more like a small alarm went off in the back of my brain, the kind you ignore at first until it starts getting louder every time you glance its way. I set my bag down and stepped inside. That's when I heard it, music. Faint, from the kitchen, lo-fi hip-hop or something electronic with a heavy bass line. Not her usual stuff. Melanie was more into soft rock and early 2000s pop. This sounded moody, new. Then I heard her voice. She was laughing at something. Not loud, but not alone either. It wasn't the kind of laugh you do when you're reading your phone or watching a video. It was mid-conversation. Someone else had to be there. I stepped down the hallway slowly, not really sure what I expected. The closer I got, the quieter things got. A few footsteps, then a sudden stop, then silence. Right before I turned the corner into the kitchen, the music shut off. Not paused. Cut. Melanie was there, standing by the laundry machine. Her hair was pulled into a bun, sleeves rolled up, like she was in the middle of folding or fixing something. But there wasn't any laundry in sight. No detergent. No piles of socks or shirts. She had one hand on the machine, the other resting on her hip like she'd been caught off guard but was trying not to show it. "Oh, hey," she said, her voice a little too bright. "You're home early." I nodded, keeping my eyes on her. Power outage at the office. Figured I'd beat rush hour for once. She nodded quickly, a bit too quickly, and then glanced at the machine like it owed her an explanation. "This thing's acting up again." It made that weird clicking noise when I turned it on, and then it just stopped. I looked at the washer. It was off. No blinking lights. No load running. I raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just annoyed. I was trying to get ahead on laundry since Sophie has her field trip tomorrow. But now I've got to call the repair guy again. You know how they are. 2-hour windows that turn into 5. I leaned against the wall and crossed my arms. "Everything else all right?" She turned toward the counter, fiddling with her phone. "Oh, by the way, if you saw that hoodie by the door, it's my friend Alicia's brother's. He stopped by to drop off those tools I borrowed from her." There was a pause. I didn't say anything. She turned back and gave me that practice smile. "He couldn't stay. Just in and out." I nodded again. "Didn't know Alicia had a brother. He lives out of state. Came up for work. He's only here for a couple days." "Huh." She didn't offer more. I didn't push. Instead, I walked over to the fridge and grabbed a soda. Tried to act normal. Tried not to let the silence feel like it was swallowing the room whole. But I could feel her watching me. Not in that warm, familiar way either. It was like she was measuring my reactions, making sure she'd covered her bases. Dinner that night was forgettable. I think we microwaved leftovers. She talked about Sophie's math project and how annoying the teacher was for assigning it on short notice. I smiled and nodded, tossed in a couple jokes. We even watched a rerun of some baking competition show she liked, the kind where people cry over cupcakes and the host wears pastel suits. But the whole time, the hoodie sat there in my mind. That dark green logo, those worn sleeves, the fact that it was hung neatly, deliberately, not tossed like someone in a hurry. And the music. Why did she shut it off so fast? Why was she by the laundry machine if nothing was running? Why lie about Alicia's brother? I stayed up a little later than usual that night. Melanie went upstairs first, saying she had a headache. I stayed on the couch, sipping my drink, pretending to scroll through news on my phone. But my eyes kept drifting to the hallway, back to that entryway where the hoodie had been. I walked over, picked it up, turned it over in my hands. Inside the tag, someone had written a name in permanent marker. The letters were faded, but I could make them out. J. Kinney. I didn't know a J. Kinney. Alicia didn't either, at least not that I'd ever heard her mention. In fact, I hadn't heard Melanie say Alicia's name in months. I set the hoodie back down where I'd found it, hung it neatly again. Then I turned out the lights and headed upstairs. She was asleep already, or pretending to be. She was facing the wall, curled up with the comforter pulled tight around her. I slipped into bed without a word, but I couldn't sleep. I laid there for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of our daughter's white noise machine humming from down the hall, feeling the space between me and Melanie like it was growing wider by the second. It wasn't the hoodie, not entirely. It wasn't just the music or the laundry machine, or even the story that didn't quite add up. It was the feeling, that low hum of doubt that vibrated under the skin, like the moment you realize the house is too quiet, or the way a dog starts barking at a window when nothing's there. But somehow, something had shifted. I didn't know what yet, but I could feel it, and once that feeling moves in, it doesn't go away. The next morning, I woke up with a weight on my chest that had nothing to do with sleep. Melanie was already up, her side of the bed cold. I could hear her in the kitchen, the scrape of a chair, the clink of a spoon against ceramic. She was making Sophie's breakfast, humming some tune under her breath like nothing was off, like we hadn't had a weird moment the night before, like the hoodie never existed. I laid there staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that maybe I was being paranoid, that maybe it really was Alicia's brother, that people hung up hoodies neatly sometimes and music just gets turned off at random, and maybe, just maybe, I was connecting dots that weren't meant to be connected. But my gut didn't buy it, kept dragging me back to the little moments, ones I hadn't thought twice about until now. Like the cologne. 2 or 3 times over the past few months, Melanie had come home late from supposed girls' nights. She always brushed past me with a quick kiss and an even quicker excuse. Drinks ran late, someone had car trouble, they went to someone's apartment to keep talking. I didn't question her. I wanted to be the kind of husband who trusted his wife. But now, in retrospect, there had been something off. A faint scent clinging to her skin, not her perfume. Not mine either. Something musky. Too sharp. I'd assumed it was from a hug. A stranger in a crowded bar. One of her friend's boyfriends, maybe. But now I remembered it differently. I remembered how she changed her clothes before even sitting down. How she jumped in the shower without so much as a word. How her phone was always face down afterward. And there were the business trips. Melanie worked in regional marketing. Her job occasionally sent her out of town, but it wasn't frequent. Once every few months, tops. But recently, she'd had 3 in the span of 6 weeks. All last minute. All to cities that didn't quite line up with the client list I vaguely remembered her telling me about. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. Work was work. And we were both busy, both exhausted. I'd been so preoccupied juggling clients and prepping Sophie's school applications that I didn't question a single hotel receipt or missing evening. But now, every client dinner and overnight started to look like a cover story. Then there was the laptop. We used to share it. We had one desktop in the den and one laptop we kept in the living room for quick browsing or paying bills. She'd use it to stream shows or shop online, and I'd jump on to check emails when my phone was charging. But about 2 months ago, Melanie changed the login. No explanation. Just, I had to update some work stuff, and now it's all password protected. I didn't think twice, until last week when I tried to use it and she got defensive. Real defensive. Like, don't go through my work stuff. It's sensitive defensive. Except I remembered clearly, her actual work computer was her office-issued MacBook, which stayed in her bag and never left the bedroom. What was so sensitive on our shared laptop that she suddenly needed to keep it locked? And then, the anniversary. It was small, but it cut deep in hindsight. Our 8th anniversary dinner. I had made reservations weeks in advance. A nice Italian place downtown that she always raved about. Got a sitter for Sophie, wore a blazer she liked. But Melanie canceled last minute, claiming a migraine. Said she needed to lie down. I picked up takeout on the way home and sat alone at the dining table while Sophie watched cartoons in the next room. The next day, I was scrolling through my feed and saw a friend of a friend post a photo. Nothing explicit. Just a cocktail glass on a granite bar counter. A wine glass beside it. A woman's hand in the edge of the frame, nails identical to Melanie's. The same exact shade she'd gotten done the day before. No face, no tags. But something about the glassware, the style of the bar, even the lighting, it was unmistakably that same trendy lounge Melanie used to mention but always claimed was too loud. At the time, I told myself it wasn't her. Just a coincidence. A similar manicure. A different woman. But now I wasn't so sure. Because now all of it, the cologne, the laptop, the locked phone, the business trips, the anniversary, was coming into focus like pieces of a mosaic I'd been refusing to see. And once you start seeing the full picture, you can't unsee it. Sophie broke my train of thought when she climbed onto the bed, dragging her blanket and stuffed penguin with her. She pressed her forehead against mine and whispered, "Daddy, are you tired or sad?" I smiled the best I could. "Just thinking, sweetheart. About work." I nodded. "Yeah, something like that." She snuggled beside me for a few more minutes, and I tried to be present. Tried not to let my mind wander to the hoodie or the scent of unfamiliar cologne or the glass on that bar counter. But it was already too late. My brain had made the jump, and it was stuck there now. By the time I came downstairs, Melanie was dressed and packing Sophie's lunch. Her tone was light, breezy, like she was trying to play normal a little too hard. "I was thinking we could go out this weekend," she said without looking up. "Maybe take Sophie to that animal sanctuary she keeps talking about?" "Sure," I said. She looked up, studied my face. "You okay?" "Just tired," I replied. She nodded. "You sure?" I gave her the same small smile I'd rehearsed in the mirror the night before. "Yeah." We didn't speak much on the drive to school. Sophie did most of the talking about birds and spelling tests and whether or not tigers could be kept as pets. Melanie chimed in here and there, but I could feel her glancing at me between sentences, trying to read me. I kept my eyes on the road. When we dropped Sophie off, Melanie kissed her cheek and waved goodbye like always. Then, as we pulled away, she reached for my hand. I didn't pull away, but I didn't squeeze back either. She noticed. I could tell. There was a long stretch of silence before she said, "Is something going on?" I didn't answer right away. I just watched the traffic light shift from red to green. Finally, I said, "You ever feel like things are happening behind your back, but you're the last to figure it out?" She blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" I shrugged. "Nothing. Just a weird feeling I've had lately." Melanie let out a tight laugh. Not genuine. "You getting paranoid on me now?" I didn't look at her. "Maybe." She shifted in her seat. "If there's something you want to ask me, Andy, ask it." I pulled the car into our driveway. K** led the engine. Turned to her, finally meeting her eyes. "I don't have a specific question," I said. "Not yet. Just noticing things." Her eyes darted, but she forced a smile. "Okay. Well, if you ever do, I'll be here." I nodded. "Good to know." She got out of the car and went inside first. I stayed behind, sitting in the driver's seat for another 5 minutes, trying to decide what was worse, the possibility that I was imagining things, or the possibility that I wasn't. I didn't know which one would hurt more, but deep down I knew. I already knew. It happened on a Friday morning. Sunny, Too warm for early spring, the kind of day where nothing should go wrong. I just dropped Sophie off at school. She ran off toward the front steps in her little hoodie and sparkly sneakers, her ponytail bouncing behind her. She was excited for some field trip, the planetarium, I think. I waved goodbye, waited until she disappeared into the building, then turned back toward the car. That's when I realized I'd left a folder on the dining table, the one with our mortgage paperwork. My plan had been to meet with a contractor about some minor repairs, and now I had to double back. I almost let it go, almost called and rescheduled. But something tugged at me, that same internal nudge I'd been feeling for weeks, the kind that whispers instead of shouts, but always points in the same direction. As I turned onto our street, something didn't sit right. Melanie's car was already in the driveway. That shouldn't have meant anything. People cancel meetings, work from home, call in sick. But she told me she had a client consultation downtown, a firm she'd been excited about for weeks. She even tried on 2 outfits the night before to make sure she looked the part. Yet there it was, her silver SUV parked in its usual spot, sunlight bouncing off the windshield like it didn't have anything to hide. I parked across the street instead of pulling into the drive. Don't ask me why. I just didn't want her hearing the garage door or the gravel crunch. I stepped out quietly, folder under my arm, pulse thumping behind my ears. It was a surreal kind of calm. Not panic, not rage. Just this hollow focus, like the moment right before a car crash. You see it coming, but you're not in it yet. I let myself in slowly, using the side entrance. Our house was still, not silent. I could hear something faint upstairs. Movement. The low creak of the floorboards in our bedroom. A voice, hers, muffled, maybe on the phone, maybe laughing. Couldn't tell. I didn't call out her name. I didn't announce myself. I walked up the stairs without making a sound, like I was afraid I'd scare the truth away before it showed itself. When I reached the top, the door to our bedroom was open just a few inches, and I saw them. There she was, my wife, lying sideways on our bed, propped up on one elbow, wearing a tank top I didn't recognize. The sheets were twisted around her legs. Her hair was down, messy, the way it got when she didn't care who saw her like that. Next to her was a guy, mid-20s, maybe shirtless, some tattoo across his ribs. His hand was resting lightly on her hip, fingers curled just slightly into her skin. The sound in the room stopped. No more talking, just silence. They both froze the moment they saw me. And that's the part one won't forget. Not the look of guilt. Not the fumbling for words. It was the freeze. That instinctual animal reaction, like they were caught by headlights. Melanie opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I didn't speak either. I just stood there for a few seconds. Enough time to watch the guy sit up slightly, confused, then panicked, then reaching for whatever pants were on the floor. I didn't yell. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. I turned around, walked back downstairs, picked up my folder off the counter, and left. I don't remember driving to Sophie's school, but somehow I got there. I waited until she came out and waved her over, telling the staff I was picking her up early due to a family issue. They didn't ask questions, just nodded, probably saw something in my face that made them back off. Melanie didn't text. She didn't call. Not that day. Not for the next several hours. Maybe she was still figuring out how to spin it. Maybe she assumed she could lie her way through it. Or maybe she knew the damage was done, and there wasn't a damn thing she could say to make it better. That afternoon, while Sophie napped on the couch, I opened the security app on my phone. You see, the year before we'd been broken into. Nothing major. Someone tried to force the garage door open. It scared Melanie enough that we agreed to install indoor cameras. One in the entry hallway, one facing the back door, and one, at my insistence, in our bedroom angled toward the closet. She'd never liked that one, said it felt invasive. But I insisted. Just for safety, I said. Just in case. And now it was time to find out if just in case was finally here. I logged into the app and pulled up the motion alerts. The footage told me everything. They'd entered the house around 9:12 a.m. Melanie came in first, talking over her shoulder, laughing. The guy followed, close behind, carrying a backpack. She reached for his hand on the stairs. At the top, they kissed. No hesitation. Not some impulsive slip-up, this was routine. They'd done this before. At 9:16 a.m., they walked into the bedroom. 25 minutes later, the camera caught movement again. They were wrapped in each other, laughing, like it was the most casual thing in the world. At 10:01 a.m., I entered the frame. The look on their faces, even in low resolution, was burned into my brain. By 10:03, I was gone. That night, I locked the bedroom door from the inside and slept in Sophie's room. Melanie didn't come home until nearly midnight. I heard the door open, the creak of her steps. Then silence. No knock, no apology, just silence. The next morning, I woke up early, made Sophie breakfast, and packed a bag. Nothing dramatic, just some essentials, clothes, paperwork, the documents I'd need. I texted my attorney. I filed for divorce the following week. That same day, I changed the banking passwords, froze our joint credit card, and revoked Melanie's access to the household accounts. She didn't even try to fight it, didn't ask questions. Maybe she knew she didn't deserve answers. A few days later, she asked to talk. I said no. She asked if we could sit down like adults. I reminded her adults didn't sneak men into the house while their child was at school. I handed my lawyer the footage. I didn't need to say a word. When you have the truth on video, people stop asking for your side. Melanie moved in with her sister temporarily. She didn't fight the custody order either. Maybe she thought she'd win sympathy by being the wounded party. Maybe she still believed she could paint herself as misunderstood. But the truth doesn't need makeup. And I was done helping her where any. I expected the silence after the storm. I thought maybe, just maybe, Melanie would keep her distance. She had been caught red-handed. There wasn't any ambiguity left to twist or spin. She knew I had the footage. She knew Sophie had been in the house just hours after it happened. I thought shame would do what reason hadn't. But Melanie didn't disappear. She pivoted. 2 weeks after I filed for divorce, I got the first blowback. A formal counterclaim from her attorney, delivered in a crisp manila envelope that felt heavier than it had any right to. The language was clean, professional, and laced with every passive-aggressive trick a legal mind could conjure. She accused me of emotional abandonment. Repeated patterns of detachment, dismissiveness, and failure to fulfill emotional partnership duties. She claimed that I had become distant, uncommunicative, and emotionally unsafe, that she had tried to connect with me multiple times, only to be met with emotional stonewalling. She was painting herself as the victim. And the worst part? She requested to stay in the house and asked for temporary full custody of Sophie. Not shared. Not even a 50-50 split. Full. The reasoning? The child requires the presence of her primary maternal caregiver during a period of emotional disruption. Melanie positioned herself as the stable figure, the constant, the one with nurturing instincts and deep emotional connection. It was like being punched and mocked at the same time. I wasn't just reading lies, I was reading strategic lies. Carefully built, designed to sting, but more than that, designed to sway. My attorney, a calm, silver-haired man named Connor who had seen too many marriages die ugly, barely blinked. "She's throwing the first punch because she knows she's losing the war," he said, flipping through the file. "You've got the footage, the financials, and the timeline. Her attorney's job is to muddy the narrative, make the court hesitate even if just a little. Our job is to keep it clean." "But she's trying to take Sophie," I said. My voice cracked on her name and I hated that. "I know," he replied, "and she won't succeed. But we have to treat this seriously. Every claim she makes, we counter. Every story she invents, we bury in truth." So we built the wall. Emails, text records, bank statements, calendar logs, travel receipts. It was tedious, boring, and brutal. But I kept going. Because every hour I spent digging through my inbox or organizing credit card charges was an hour closer to protecting my daughter from a we*p*nized lie. Melanie had claimed she was working during 3 separate weekends over the past 6 months. We proved that 2 of those weekends were spent at a boutique hotel 40 minutes from our house. Not even out of town. I pulled receipts showing takeout ordered to the room under her name. She had paid with our joint card. She claimed I was emotionally absent during our anniversary. I submitted a reservation confirmation, the email reminders, even the note from the hostess thanking me for the attempt to reschedule. I showed the online receipt from the lounge she'd actually gone to that night, where she drank a $14 blackberry martini and posted an Instagram story within 15 feet of her alleged migraine bed. We combed through her work calendar. Connor pointed out something I hadn't even thought to look for. 3 meetings she told me about never actually appeared on the firm's records. They'd been fabricated, added to her phone manually, not through her work email system. I submitted *TS, along with a declaration from one of her colleagues, someone I barely knew but who confirmed she had started acting secretive months ago. Then there was the footage. The footage spoke for itself. It showed her entering the home with the guy, later identified as Jamie Kinney, at 9:12 a.m. We even tracked his LinkedIn profile and found no professional overlap. No shared projects. He wasn't a coworker. He wasn't Alicia's brother. He was just someone else. Someone invited in while Sophie's drawings still hung on the fridge and our wedding photo sat 3 feet from the bed. We submitted it all. Connor bundled the footage with a sworn affidavit and labeled it primary evidence of marital breach. The court accepted the documentation without hesitation. Melanie's counterclaim didn't get dismissed. That's not how family court works. But the judge made it clear in our first hearing. There was ample reason to question the credibility of the respondent's characterization of events. Melanie didn't look at me during that hearing. She wore a navy dress, hair tied back, and didn't speak unless prompted by her attorney. She looked tired, not broken, just exhausted, like someone who thought they'd be able to outrun consequences and was realizing, too late, that the track had ended. Outside the courthouse, I waited until Sophie was picked up by her grandmother. Then I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel for a long time. I wasn't proud of any of it. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't even feel angry anymore. Just tired. Hollow. Like I'd been wringing out pieces of myself for weeks and had nothing left but static. Melanie had turned our private disaster into a courtroom narrative. And no matter how clean my side looked on paper, the truth is, everyone in that room saw what had been lost. A marriage. Family. Something that once had structure and rhythm, now just sharp edges and silence. What haunted me most wasn't the betrayal. It was how easily she had shifted into strategy. How the woman I'd built a life with had looked me in the face one day and said, "I love you," and then weeks later told a judge I was cold and distant and unsafe. She didn't just cheat. She rebranded. She turned our history into an exhibit. And the sickest part? Some part of her probably believed it. Not out of malice, out of necessity. Out of fear. Because if she admitted what really happened, if she told the truth unfiltered, then she'd have to live with what that made her. So she crafted a version she could live with. But I was the one left cleaning up the truth. That night, after Sophie fell asleep in her room, now at my place under temporary joint custody, I sat at the kitchen table, flipping through old photos. I found one from a beach trip 2 summers ago. The 3 of us grinning. Melanie's hair blowing into Sophie's mouth. Me squinting into the sun. We looked happy. And maybe we were. But looking back now, I couldn't tell if we were actually close, or if we were just convenient. Maybe the signs had been there longer than I wanted to admit. Maybe I'd been pretending too. But the difference was, I never made her the enemy. She made me hers. And now I was learning how to be my own defender. I thought we'd passed the worst of it. After the court reviewed the footage and documents, things quieted down. Temporarily, Melanie's lawyer shifted focus to negotiating softer terms, supervised visits, structured drop-offs. She didn't push for full custody again, not after the judge's warning. The narrative she'd built of being a wounded wife trying to survive emotional abandonment had collapsed under its own contradictions. For a while, I felt like the storm had moved on. Sophie and I settled into a rhythm. Breakfast together, walks to school, story time at night with the same 3 books in rotation. We laughed more. She started drawing again. Her world, while smaller, felt safe. Then came the first act of retaliation. It was subtle at first. A sudden surge of anonymous texts from a blocked number. Messages that started out vague. "You're not who you pretend to be," and "don't act like the good guy." Then came more pointed ones. "Ask your daughter how it feels to have a liar for a dad." I blocked them, changed my number. It didn't help. A week later, the same messages came through from a different number, then a different one after that. At first, I wondered if Melanie was behind it directly, but the tone didn't feel like her. It felt younger, harsher, more impulsive. Then I remembered Jamie, the guy from the bedroom. I hadn't seen him since the day I walked in, but his face had been caught on the security camera. His full name was in the court file, and if he'd seen any of the paperwork Melanie had, he would have known I wasn't just walking away quietly. I started watching my surroundings more carefully. I swapped out the locks, reinstalled a smarter home security system, reinforced the windows, put cameras at every entrance, including the garage. Not because I thought someone would break in, but because I needed the illusion of control back. Then things escalated from digital to physical. One Thursday night around 10 p.m., I heard the sound of glass shattering in the garage. A sharp crack, followed by metallic crunching. I ran outside, barefoot, heart pounding. The garage door was still down, but the side window, the small one near the shelves, had been smashed in. Spray paint covered the exterior. Thick red letters that spelled out one word. Traitor. My stomach dropped. I opened the garage door. Both car windows on my SUV had been smashed. My driver's seat slashed open. The back wall had been tagged with more spray paint, crude drawings, phrases I won't repeat. Sophie's tricycle had been thrown against the far wall, cracked down the middle. I called the police, filed a report. They took photos, asked questions, barely masked their indifference. I showed them the footage. Two figures, hooded, but not careful enough. The face of one was clear as day. I recognized him from a photo Melanie had once shown me, grinning next to Jamie at a summer cookout. His friend, maybe roommate, a guy named Trevor. The officer raised an eyebrow as he paused the footage. "You want to press charges?" "Absolutely." He nodded and scribbled something down. "You have any reason to believe this is tied to your ex?" I stared at the screen. "No," I said, "but I think it's tied to the guy she brought into our home." After that night, things shifted from messy divorce to something closer to survival mode. Connor, my attorney, immediately requested a temporary protective order. It was granted within 24 hours. Anyone affiliated with Jamie Kinney or Trevor Maddox was to stay at least 300 feet away from my property and my daughter. I gave the school a copy of the order. They updated their system without question. I started walking Sophie to school every morning, staying until I saw her disappear behind the door. She noticed the change. "Are you scared of something?" she asked one morning, her small hand clutching mine tighter than usual. I hesitated. "No," I said gently, "but I want to be with you, that's all." She didn't ask again. Melanie, for her part, went quiet again. No text, no email, no apology. I didn't know if she knew what had happened, if Trevor or Jamie had told her, or if she'd figured it out after the restraining order. A part of me hoped she had. A part of me wanted her to feel the consequences creeping closer. But it was Sophie who bore the weight in the quiet. She became more withdrawn at night, less interested in the bedtime books, more prone to asking questions she never would have asked before. "Why do people say mean things about good dads? Why don't you talk to mom anymore? Are you mad all the time now?" I wanted to lie, to wrap her in some fiction about adult disagreements and misunderstandings. But I couldn't. So I just said, "I'm doing my best, kiddo, and I'm always here, no matter what." She nodded, then said something I'll never forget. "You're the one who stays." That night, I cried for the first time since this all began. Not out of grief, not even out of anger, out of something deeper, a mix of guilt and love and the sudden, sharp realization that no matter how well I tried to hold the line, my daughter could still see the cracks. After that, I adjusted everything. I shifted my work hours, Dropped my early morning clients. Rearranged meetings so I could be the one walking her in and picking her up. I canceled a weekend conference in Chicago. I let my assistant handle more of the overflow. I built my days around Sophie, not out of fear but out of defiance. If they were going to come at me, fine. But they weren't getting to her. Nights were still tense. I checked the cameras before bed. Kept a bat next to the door. Slept lighter than I ever had in my life. But slowly, a strange kind of calm started to grow beneath the anxiety. Not peace, not yet, but structure, routine. A sense that even if the world outside was messy and vindictive, inside this house we had rules. Safety. Love. One afternoon, I got a call from the detective assigned to the vandalism case. "Thought you'd want to know," he said. Trevor Maddox pled out. Restitution and community service. His lawyer didn't want to go into trial with that footage. "Any link to your ex?" I asked. "No direct connection. Not enough to prove conspiracy or direction. But between you and me, he didn't do this on a whim. Somebody stirred him up." I hung up with a strange cocktail of satisfaction and emptiness. The legal system had worked, technically, but it still didn't undo the damage. Sophie's bike was broken. Our trust had been broken. What mattered to me wasn't a criminal record, it was protection. That night, I told Sophie we'd get her a new tricycle. She looked up at me and asked, "Can it be purple this time?" "Of course," I said. "Anything you want." We went the next day. She picked one with a glittery seat and a little basket. We rode it home together. I walked beside her while she pedaled along the sidewalk, sun on her face, humming a song only she seemed to know. For a moment, it felt like something good again. And in the middle of all this wreckage, that was enough.